As we start this sermon, I invite you to look in your announcement folders. There should be an insert, half-sheet white paper. And if you need an extra copy of that, Bob Monkman has extra copies. He'll be passing those around. And you'll find 5 questions. On page 1, you don't need to write full answers down. Just jot down a thought or two just to help you remember what your answers are to those questions. On page 2, I invite you to actually write a full sentence or maybe 2 sentences, but try to limit yourself to 15 words and to answer those questions. I'll give you a few moments to do that. The reason I'm asking for you to really think about the last 2 questions and write a full thought is I'm going to ask for some sharing from a few of you with those questions later in the sermon. And so if you're able to really crystallize and focus your thought, it'll make the sharing go faster. In last week's sermon, I contended that a church, and I am talking about Christian churches here, is a community of people who are connected to God and God's purposes, who are following or at least seeking to follow Jesus, who are in covenant with each other and with God as we seek to live a life grounded in love, and who desire to be in a deepening relationship with God as revealed in Jesus. This week is a look at what it means to join such a community, what it means to be a member of a church. Let me start by saying what I don't think being a member of a church is like. It's not like joining a gym. When you join a gym, you are not establishing a covenant with the gym members. Can you imagine going to a gym and having all the membership need to show up and have a ritual where you joined? I promise to come regularly and to lose. Lillian Daniels pointed out that at a gym, you're signing up to receive certain services, to use the equipment, to receive advice from experts, all as part of a financial transaction. It's different at a church. You're not at the receiving end of a contract when you join a church. You're in a giving-receiving covenant. You promise to do more than show up and use the facilities. What that something else is may look different depending upon the season of your life, but there's always that something more that is happening. Perhaps in one season you'll contribute by holding other people in prayer and love. Perhaps you'll make a contribution to the community by volunteering for one ministry now, and in a few years find that your talents and gifts and time have shifted, and the ministries in the church have shifted, and a different ministry is a better match for you to be involved in. In one season of your life, you may be able to contribute only a tiny amount of money, and in another season, you may be able to be one of the biggest givers in the church. Joining a church is not only about getting spiritually fit. It is about getting spiritually fit, we hope, but it's about being part of a community that is connected to God and God's purposes by following Jesus. It's about being in covenant with others in the community and with God as we seek to live lives more deeply grounded in love, and as our relationships with God made known to us in Jesus deepens. There are some practical institutional reasons to join a church. The United Church of Christ and the Christian Church Disciples of Christ both have polities that are congregational, meaning that the congregations run their own affairs. That's why we're having an annual meeting to adopt a budget after worship today. We're responsible for creating our own budget, for amending it, modifying it, adopting it, and then living up to it. We're accountable to each other in the church for that. So becoming a member of a church means, under our polity, that when you join a church, you get to vote on these types of matters. And I think that that's honestly one of the reasons that the Disciples of Christ and the United Church of Christ have membership, is because we're congregationally based. My understanding is that in the Roman Catholic Church, you become a member by being baptized. And you're a member of the Roman Catholic Church, not a Roman Catholic Church. And you may be within a parish, and so you're supposed to go to a particular church, but you're not a member of that church, you're a member of the church. But because the Roman Catholic Church is hierarchical, and we're, lowerarchical, that you can be a member of the church, and it's not important that you be a member of a church. But we have that congregational polity. So one can look at church membership purely from that practical viewpoint. I'd rather look at it from a covenantal viewpoint. We aren't members merely for the sake of the church's business. We are members, and we become members to be in covenant with each other. And when we become in covenant with each other, we become mutually accountable to each other. That's why someone doesn't just fill out a membership form and drop it off at the office. Joining a church is a mutual thing. We join with each other. Every time someone joins the church, all the existing members join that person, and the covenant is renewed. And every time someone joins the church, every time someone leaves the church as well, for that matter, the church changes. And that is, I think, a God thing, because God is part of every covenant. Because God is in every covenant. Joining a church, becoming a member of a church, is a God thing. That's why I picked these two scriptures for today. They are stories about commitment, about relationship, about love. The first lesson, immediately preceding it, Peter, James, and John are up on a mountain with Jesus, and they have this deeply spiritual experience of the divine, so deep that they hear the voice of God, and they come down from this mountaintop experience, and they find the disciples trying and failing to heal a child with epilepsy. In an exasperated tone, Jesus tells the father to bring the child to him. I love it that Jesus occasionally gets a little testy. Jesus gets a medical history, sort of like a good physician, I suppose, as the boy goes into a seizure. After the father gives the history and explains how horrible this has been for the child and for the family, the father says, as rendered in the message, "If you can do anything about it, do it." And Jesus says, If? There's no if among believers. Then I believe, the father says. Help me with my doubts. This rendering in the message, I believe, help me with my doubts, that's not as accurate, and it sort of shows some of the limits of the message. It's not really as accurate as the New Revised Standard Version renders it. I believe, help my unbelief. If you've heard me preach for any length of time, you know that Marcus Borg is one of my favorite theologians and biblical scholars. Pastor Brendan and I referred to his work explaining the difference between a contemporary understanding of the word believe and a relational understanding of the word faith. He's also written about the roots of the word believe. The idea that having right beliefs that define whether or not someone is a Christian may be widespread, but it's actually a fairly recent understanding. It's a recent, in Borg's word, distortion. He explains. It began with the Reformation in the 1500s and the Enlightenment in the 1600s and continues today. Protestants distinguished themselves from Catholics by what they believed compared to what Catholics believed. Then Protestantism divided into many churches, each distinguishing themselves from the others by what they believed. So also the Enlightenment heightened the emphasis on believing, characterized by the birth of modern science and scientific ways of knowing. The Enlightenment called into question many conventional Christian ideas. The earth is the center of the universe. Creation is having happened in 6 days, and really not all that long ago. A worldwide flood that killed every living animal, land creature, more recently than when the earth was created, but not all that long ago, and more generally the miraculous supernatural interventions that sometimes seem to occur. With these notions challenged, the response in much of Western Christianity was to believe in spite of the evidence to the contrary. This was the birth of modern literalism, biblical literalism, with its emphasis on the literal factual nature of the biblical narratives, from creation through Exodus from Egypt to the birth, life, and resurrection of Jesus. Add to that popular Christianity's emphasis on the afterlife, and being a Christian became believing the right things now for the sake of heaven later. Of course, the language of believing has been part of Christianity from the first century onward, but it didn't refer primarily to believing the right theological beliefs. It meant something more like the English word beloving. To believe in God and Jesus was to beloved God and Jesus. Namely, it meant to commit one's self to a relationship of attentiveness and faithfulness. Commitment and fidelity are the ancient meanings of faith and believing. With this understanding of believe, I think this word, if we think of this word as meaning to give my heart to, think again about the Father's declaration to Jesus. I believe, help my unbelief. I beloved, help me where I'm holding on to my heart and not letting it go. I give you my heart. Help me fully let go. This understanding of believe is a relational understanding. It's much closer to the understanding of faith we've talked about in the past 3 sermons. Likewise, the story of Thomas' declaration when he experienced Jesus, the resurrected Jesus, could be seen as a statement of belief, a contemporary statement of belief, or a statement of beloved. Some interpret it as a statement of belief, of mental assent, citing Thomas's declaration to Jesus, my Lord and my God. Catholic apologist Trent Horn says, this is one of the most powerful and direct evidences of the doctrine of the deity of Jesus, or the belief that Jesus is fully God and fully human. Horn understands this declaration to be about Jesus. I read the story and I hear the drama. I hear the statement as a statement of beloving. I hear it not as a statement about Jesus, but a statement to Jesus. Having missed the appearance of the resurrected Jesus the week before, Thomas experiences it and is overwhelmed. His declaration is one of the heart more than one of the head. And this understanding encourages us to hear the final verse of the reading differently. Have you given me your heart because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen me and yet give me their hearts. I think that becoming a member of a church is in part an act of beloving. When we enter into the covenantal relationship with each other and with God, it's not an act of having the right beliefs. It's an act of committing to journey together in community, following the way of Jesus. Looking at your answers to the other questions on the page, did you say or imply anything about God, Jesus, the Spirit? And what does the presence or absence of God talk on your answers say to you?